Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Boris Johnson's stranglehold on British politics is over. An administration built entirely upon lies and the bogus charisma of one of the single most fraudulent individuals ever to inhabit public life in Britain has come to an inevitable and inglorious end. Even sooner, perhaps, than some of us expected or predicted, but no less spectacular than would have always been the case. Because democracy and decency are twins. You can't have one without the other, and you can't have democracy when there is no decency in Downing Street. And there hasn't been any decency in Downing Street since 2019. I spent yesterday's programme looking at the resignations of Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak, and I think in retrospect we were far too kind to them, particularly perhaps to Sajid Javid. The idea that these men and now women have suddenly discovered a taste for decency, a respect for democracy, a reverence for integrity is absolutely outrageous. To have sat there silently while this man rode roughshod over all of our most valued conventions, traditions, standards, while he once again thought it was churlish of us to expect him to abide by the network of obligation that binds us all, is actually breathtaking in its audacity. How bloody dare they? How dare they talk today about the importance of honesty, the relevance of integrity, the necessity of decency? How dare these nodding dogs and political pygmies posture in a way that casts them as having somehow exercised moral judgment after facilitating, championing, and cheerleading a singularly disgraceful and despicable episode in British political history. If you are expecting a celebration on this programme today, then I'm sorry. I was too. And yet, as the dust has settled around this complete carnage, I find myself dispirited, dismayed, and angry. There's relief. Of course there's relief. The house is no longer on fire. The arsonist is being driven away in the back of a police van. But the damage that's been done to the country that we love, while these people have tried to cast themselves as patriots, the damage is incalculable and cannot be repaired for generations. Everything is broken. Everything is broken. Broken by the vanity of one man and the cultish dedication to his promotion practiced everywhere from the office of the owner of the Daily Mail right down to the silliest, most deluded voter in the country. It is incredible. Why relief? Because it could have been worse. Yesterday, there were moments when you wondered what the British equivalent of January the 6th would look like. The utter refusal of a man so high on his own self-importance and delusional vanity that he would contemplate anything in protection of his own position. Where would he go next? And thankfully, and I don't think it's something we could take for granted, thankfully, somehow the Conservative Party found not just the means, but the will to slam the brakes upon his ego trip. But there were moments yesterday when I wondered, and you do wonder, of course, how many times have we wondered together over the last few years whether we were the ones that were going mad? But to hear one of Johnson's former bagmen, Will Walden, on at the end of Tom Swarbrick's programme there, talking about how even he feared that we were close to seeing a dismantling of democratic norms. That's how bad it was. Because they would have still cheered. Do you know what the front page of the Daily Mail is today? The owner of the Daily Mail took a decision not long ago to get rid of an editor called Geordie Gregg, who had somehow managed to begin the detoxification of the single most diabolical influence on public life that this country has ever seen. And somehow that editor was managing to turn things around. But the owner took a decision that they were going to go all in on backing Boris Johnson, they were going to bet the house on supporting Boris Johnson, and they were going to get rid of a man who could have changed the face of the British media in a way that is sorely and desperately needed. But they didn't. Do you know what their front page is today? Hold on to your hats. This is supposedly the finest minds on Fleet Street, the best political judgment in our profession. And their front page today, Boris stares down the mutiny. And then page after page after page of praise and paeans to the most corrupt man ever to hold public office in this country. Attacks upon the people that have brought him down, culminating, and you won't believe this, but I've tweeted a picture just to prove it, culminating in a headline that seeks to blame so-called Remainers for Boris Johnson's self-inflicted catastrophe. Crowing Remainiacs is a headline in the Daily Mail today. One of their writers, PMs should be ousted by the people, not a bunch of TV pundits and bureaucrats deranged by Brexit hatred. This was written after the Chancellor of the Exchequer had resigned in disgust, after the Secretary of State for Health had resigned in disgust, after more ministers resigned in a single day under Boris Johnson than had ever resigned under a single Prime Minister in the history of this country. So there will be no celebrations on this programme today, because this is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning. And what happens next is something that nobody knows. Many, many millions of people aren't ready yet to make the link between Boris Johnson and Brexit, to recognise that the inevitability of this inglorious collapse was written the moment he walked into Downing Street. Written the moment, in many ways, he decided to publish the column calling for a withdrawal from the European Union instead of the one that his genuine instincts led him to, which was the obvious sense and good sense of staying. But my God, spare me the mayor. Well, it's not even mea culpas, is it? Spare me the moral pontifications of people that put him there and until 2:10 yesterday were bending the knee in front of him. 24 hours it took for Nadhim Zahawi to say on national live television that he doesn't think Boris Johnson lies, that he thinks he tells the truth at all times, to sending a letter calling upon him to walk the plank. Let's not beat about the bush. Very, very clever politicking and tactical nous from Nadhim Zahawi, putting himself in the position of being the most powerful politician in government at precisely the moment that the leadership contest begins, as he probably knew it would. But there were moments yesterday when we were not sure. When the abject, crass, tragic self-regard of one man could have wreaked damage upon this country, the like of which we have never seen before. And that's what I mean by saying that we almost, I think, discovered what the British equivalent of January the 6th in America would have looked like. It would have looked very different. They're completely different countries, completely different political systems, completely different constitutions. One of them is written and one of them is not, as you know. But I don't know. If it wasn't for that unending avalanche of resignation and the fact that it started again this morning, I think that's probably even more crucial than what happened yesterday. The fact that it started again this morning, the fact that resignation letters were dropping on the Downing Street doormat before your shredded wheat had even been introduced to their morning milk. It was unsustainable. And it reached a point where even the most delusional and despicable man ever to hold public office in this country could no longer keep reality at bay. But my God, he tried. House of Commons yesterday, he meant it. Even when he stood before a select committee and accidentally revealed that he really did meet with a former KGB colonel hours after a NATO meeting and without his security detail. Something that Dominic Raab described as complete nonsense when asked a question by a Labour MP not long ago about precisely those facts which emerged yesterday. The chaos with which he deliberately operates. It's not like an accident or a price worth paying for the occasional brilliance. It's everything that he is corrupt and chaotic. Everything that he does is corrupt and chaotic. Everything he has ever been is corrupt and chaotic. So proper patriots, people who actually love this country, people who actually hate what has been and is being done to it, we don't get to celebrate today, I don't think. We don't even get to take 3 hours off, I don't think. Because the flames may have been extinguished, but the house is a burnt-out wreck. It's a charred shell. It's a broken frame. And I don't know where the repairs start. I don't know what the repairs look like, and I don't even believe that the repairs can begin in good faith until the other big lie is acknowledged. And there is not much chance of that happening anytime soon, because once this dreadful leadership battle gets underway, someone beautifully described yesterday the idea of choosing the next Conservative leader as being like choosing which rancid toilet to go to at the Glastonbury Festival. But when this gets underway, then we're back with the bloody B word, I'm afraid. We're back with the newspapers clinging to the cultish carcass of this ridiculous project. And the leadership candidate who seems most likely to keep the balloon of nonsense inflated will be anointed by the facilitators, will be hosed down by the client journalists, like the ludicrous political editor of The Sun, and similarly absurd individuals in journalism. They'll all begin the process of pretending none of this ever happened, and Johnson is just a distant memory in our rearview mirror, and moving forward all the same priorities will return to the forefront of public discourse. And the madness will begin again, albeit with a considerably less corrupt ringleader. The circus will be every bit as bonkers. And some of us will sit here wondering what the hell has happened. Some of us will present radio shows every day wondering what the hell has happened. How was this permitted to unfold? How were we allowed to allow this sort of poison, this toxicity into public discourse? Never mind politics, never mind Downing Street. The fire is out. But the house is a charred wreck. I don't know what happens next, and you don't know what happens next. But it's a phone-in show, so we should talk to each other. And the number you need to do that is 0345 6060 973. 2 lines of inquiry, perhaps, although this is one of those mornings where I think we can almost treat each other as each other's therapists. Just ring and chat. Ring and talk. I don't particularly want to hear from many of the public figures. There's a few I'd talk to. I'd like to hear, for example, what Rory Stewart has to say. I was very interested to hear what Andrew Marr had to say. But this isn't a programme where there's a gap that needs filling. So we'll book the What's It editor of the Daily Bugle. And so I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I want to listen to you. I want to know what you think about what's happened to us, what's happened to our country, what continues to unfold and unravel. And I want to know what it feels like today to finally see clearly what you've been part of, what you have facilitated. There was one reason and one reason only to vote for Boris Johnson in 2019. He wasn't Jeremy Corbyn. I get that. I get that completely. I voted Labour, but I did so knowing that the Labour leader was about to hand an absolutely enormous majority, gift-wrapped with a big pink bow, to a man who would indubitably prove to be the worst Prime Minister this country has ever seen. I thought the unravelling would take a little longer. I thought that the unveiling of his true self would happen in an incremental fashion. And I worried that when the end came, it wouldn't do justice to the awfulness of the man. I worried that he might slime away, that he might slither out of public office, that history might somehow let him and his facilitators off the hook and posterity would give him a pass. I worried, actually, that the end would not measure up to the middle. But my God, this is an end that could only have happened to someone as unutterably awful as Boris Johnson. The end is every bit as bad and base and gross as his premiership and his character. Unbelievable to imagine that the end could actually live up to the life. And it has. It's over. Boris Johnson is done. He is finished. He is an ex-Prime Minister. But our country, our beloved country, it's going to be living with the legacy of his awfulness for the rest of our lives.
O'Brien.
It's 20 minutes after 10. I could cry, actually. Not popping champagne corks, not cheering, not bouncing around the studio as I thought I might be. I could cry today. I could cry for my country. And that's incredible and quite unexpected. But enough about me. Rachel Venables is outside Downing Street, where later today Boris Johnson is expected to resign. Precisely what he will resign from remains a little unclear, and the notion of a caretaker government being led by him until the autumn is very much in play. But Rachel, if you would, imagine that we'd just woken up and yours was the first voice that we heard this morning. Tell us what's happened since we went to sleep last night.
Well, James, of course, we've been counting resignations of government ministers, PPSs, secretaries of state ever since 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. That was when Sajid Javid and then Rishi Sunak first decided enough was enough. 52 MPs quitting the government later. The resignation that counts the most is incoming. Behind this famous black door here at number 10 Downing Street, Boris Johnson, we understand, is crafting the statement to signal the end of his premiership. It looks as though it's over. He has decided he is resigning 2 years and 348 days after he first went to the Queen and told her he could form a government. We know that a number 10 Downing Street spokesperson have said on the record that the Prime Minister will make a statement to the country today. We still don't know when, and we also still don't know what exactly he's going to lay out, what his resignation will look like, because it sounds, certainly the political murmurings from many of the correspondents lined down the street here, as though he is going to offer to stay on as Prime Minister and allow a leadership contest to take place, then stepping down once the new leader takes over as Prime Minister sometime in the autumn. However, the strength of feeling amongst the remaining even Conservative cabinet ministers in place is that that can't happen. This morning, even Nadeem Zahawi, his new Chancellor, wrote a letter saying he needs to go, and the perception from many of the people who've newly resigned, even George Freeman, who stepped down as Science Minister this morning, said that's not good enough. He needs to hand over the keys to Downing Street today and let a caretaker Prime Minister take over while the Tories fight amongst themselves about who can replace him.
So, full clarity is yet to arrive. Do we have any idea when the actual speech will be delivered? Are you on lectern duty, Rachel? Are you waiting to see when the lectern is wheeled out into Downing Street? Or is there any prospect, as Chris Bryant called for earlier today, of him delivering the speech in Parliament, as many would perhaps expect?
I'm on lectern duty, sat here at number 10. We're on standby to see any movement of ministerial cars, to see him heading to Parliament. At the moment, as I said, we just don't know. This is a moving feast, and I think it sounds like there are still negotiations going on. He will still be debating, as I mentioned, with members of his own party, with his government, as to, whether or not he is going to appoint a caretaker Prime Minister, in which case, who is that person that could push this announcement back further. We just don't know. What we do know is, as I said, it looks like he is signalling the end, but when that happens in the form it takes, we're still waiting to see.
Rachel Venables live from Downing Street, where, as you heard, she will remain on what is so laughably referred to sometimes as lectern watch, waiting to see whether or not the furniture of public announcements is wheeled out into the street outside that iconic door, and of course when it is, we will cross live and immediately to hear it. I'll allow myself one moment, all right, just one moment, and if there are any more moments like this, then Keith will have to get the tin and you can tell me off. But I hope it happens on our show. I really do. I hope we get to play the metaphorical last post for this disgusting premiership on this programme. I really do, because I know you felt as lonely as I have at some points over the last 3 years, and if it wasn't for each other, I don't know if we would have got through it. Just staring at the nudity of this ridiculous Prime Minister, staring at the nakedness, being absolutely clear about just how awful he was, and yet turning to other corners of the media, listening to other radio broadcasts, opening up newspapers and seeing a complete denial of reality, a complete distortion of decency. It's been bizarre. And that, I think, is why the expected celebrations have not yet arrived, and quite possibly never will. Because the house may no longer be on fire, but the damage done by the flames is only now being assessed. David's in Leeds. David, what would you like to say?
Do you know what? My favourite phrase that has been repeated ad nauseum over the last few years is the will of the people. We've heard it over and over and over again. And it's just started to become this sort of parody of everything that we really do need to talk about. Because, sure, 2016, the will of the people was to leave the EU. And I get that. And we did. But what's the will of the people now? Are we trying to say that the will of the people hasn't changed since 2016? Because in 2019, more people voted for leftist parties than voted for Boris Johnson's government. And now we're looking at the state of this government, and that government's changed its mind about Boris Johnson being the leader. I don't understand how we got here.
Do you know? I don't know if today's the day. That was one of the questions I was thinking about asking. Between you and me, David, I don't know what's going to come out of my gob until the light comes on. And on a morning like today, I was actually quite frightened that I didn't know what I was going to say and I didn't know what direction things were going to go in. But if I have a sort of vague question bubbling around in the back of my mind, it would be one that we've asked each other many times before, and that is, how has this happened? How did it come to this? We may get onto that question a little later in the programme, but you share my sense of it's not quite desolation, is it? Because today is a good day for the truth. It is a good day for the decent. But it's a grim view ahead of us, never mind behind us.
I think we're just tired. I think we're all just so tired because, I rang Sheila and I told her my whole story around why Partygate was so upsetting to me. I lost my mum and I had to sit on my own for months. My dad was newly widowed. I didn't get to see him, all of that. And the whole time we're told there were no parties. Oh, well, there was a party, but I wasn't there. Oh, well, there was a party and I was there, but I didn't know it was a party, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then it all came out and we're told, well, yeah, but move on. We've been
not just move on, mate. It's your concerns are fluff, according to one of the last men standing when it came to keeping Boris Johnson's ludicrous administration afloat. I don't know if Jacob Rees-Mogg has said anything yet, but him and Doris, my goodness me, both claim to be Catholic, of course. That's going to be a long confession, isn't it, for them? A very long confession.
Rees-Mogg is just the strangest person, the utter disdain that he shows people, but that's indicative of his boss. Boris Johnson shows disdain to all of us all the time, every single day. We've had to put up with it, and it's now the time where the British public can finally stand up as a unit, as a bunch of people, and say what I've been saying for months on everything that I do. We deserve better than that. We deserve better than it.
We do, but I don't know that everybody else is yet ready for the reality or the realisation that clearly settled upon your shoulders long ago. Many people will still, I don't know what the hashtags are going to change to later today, back Boris or our Prime Minister or scum media or whatever it is people are doing to avoid looking in the mirror, because what they will see when they look in the mirror is complicity in a national catastrophe, a completely avoidable and completely self-inflicted national catastrophe, which is why, despite some people having the green shoots of optimism, I don't think you're going to see a Tom Tugendhat in Downing Street anytime soon, or rather at the helm of the Conservative Party. I don't think that anyone will be allowed to achieve prominence who could possibly be open to the accusation of not still being in the Brexit cult, because Johnson and Brexit are twin. They're the twin sons of disgrace. They really are. Johnson and Brexit, you don't get one without the other. You can't separate them. And just because Johnson is going doesn't mean that the equally nonsensical, ridiculous and intellectually bankrupt project of Brexit is going to go with him. 28 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Gerald is in Glasgow. Gerald, what made you pick up the phone?
The absolute state that I'm in at the moment.
Yeah.
Because feels like I've woken up and I've been told I need to sit an exam, and I've not studied, and I have no idea what I'm meant to answer about.
That's a superb analogy. Thank you. I'm having that. It's like an anxiety dream.
Yeah, I woke up. It's like someone's standing over me, screaming that I need to get myself in some sort of preparedness for what's about to come. And I have absolutely no idea what happened between going to bed and waking up this morning. Yeah. I went to bed with a few dozen ministers and members of the government having resigned. This morning I wake up, it seems like everyone's left. And I have no idea who's driving us off the cliff at the moment. Who can I blame?
Yes, and I don't know who is. I mean, even when we do know who is in the driving seat for the next months, I don't know that you'll have substantive answers to any of the questions that you're currently asking.
The notion of someone replacing Boris Johnson at this point, from who we have at our disposal, it's like getting a menu of diseases and having your dad order for you.
I wish I could argue with you, but as you speak...
You have no control.
And this is a high bar, but a man who has a very real claim to being the most ridiculous member of Parliament in history, never mind according to the current dismal crop. But Desmond Swain has just tweeted, "I'm backing Suella."
That's it's like saying I'm backing being scissored in half by a car.
I'm with you. At least we're not alone. There is comfort to be found in company. Meanwhile, if you are in the mood for this sort of gallows humour, then I can tell you that Brexit hardman Steve Baker has claimed that people are imploring him to run for leader. And I think in one interview this morning, he even described himself as the rebel commander. So, like I said, it's not the beginning of the end. It's just the end of the beginning. Holly Harris is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 10:34 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I won't be inviting most of the faces that are popping up on my television screens in this studio onto the programme today because they don't get to wash their hands so quickly and so completely, even if they submitted their letters and voted for no confidence last time round. They were there in 2019 while the rest of us were screaming at the top of our voices about how naked the Emperor was. Rebel commander, Brexit hardman Steve Baker was insisting that he was absolutely the right man for the job. And they don't get to wash their hands. The stench of corruption and complicity should, of course, hang around these men and women for the rest of their natural lives. But it probably won't. Talking about integrity and decency and honesty. And not once using the word suddenly. I have suddenly decided that integrity and decency and honesty matter in public life. I wonder whether that letter from Simon MacDonald will prove to be the most significant political intervention ever taken by a civil servant, or certainly the most significant element of this story. That perhaps was the moment when somebody found the wherewithal to understand that extraordinarily bad behaviour calls for something out of the ordinary in response. We never got that. I don't know that we ever could as journalists. You can't really describe a Trump or a Johnson using the language and the rubric that we've used to describe all other leaders, because they are not as all other leaders. They are unique in their corruption. Different men, and very different sorts of corruption built on very different foundation stones. But in terms of scale and potential impact, peas in a pod. Utter disregard for the truth and utter dedication to self-advancement, self-promotion, self. So it was Simon MacDonald, perhaps, by essentially calling Downing Street a bunch of lying fraudsters. All of them, not just the Prime Minister, but everyone that he's infected, every bit of the fish that rots from the head down. Maybe that was the moment that it became unsustainable. But don't let these people wash their hands like Pontius Pilate. Don't let them. My God, they're all filthy, all of them, up to their shoulders in filth. Zahawi and Sunak and Javid, not just the obvious disasters like Rees-Mogg and Doris and Patel and Raab, but the ones who still seek to establish a semblance of respectability or integrity. I called it wrong yesterday. I should apologise to you for that. I think comparing Sajid Javid to Nadeem Zahawi painted Sajid Javid in a temporarily rosy light, but that light went out before the programme was over. They are all utterly gross. Every single one of them. If you absolutely had to stay in the job, then you sat on your hands on the back benches until this monster was gone. And a few of them did that. And the reason why I'm not celebrating this morning is that neither the country nor the Conservative Party is ready yet to reward them and recognise them and put them in the driving seat. The next leader of the Conservative Party will still be a member of the Brexit cult. Either an honest member of the Brexit cult, too stupid and too blinded by delusion and exceptionalism to recognise the reality, or someone cynical enough like Liz Truss to understand that you have to pretend to be part of the Brexit cult in order to get ahead. And of course, Keir Starmer could be out of a job by the end of next week. depending on when Durham police stick their head above the parapet. So no champagne corks today. 10:38 is the time. I'm not going to concern myself unduly with the stupid corner of the inbox this morning, but I am just going to remind you that it's not my fault that you see what you see when you look in the mirror that I hold up. It's not my fault, okay? It's not entirely your fault either. It's the fault of people like Boris Johnson and newspaper editors and newspaper owners. It's certainly not my fault. But you don't have to look. You can look away. You can turn over. You can go and do something less boring instead, as that song used to say on Why Don't You? But it's not my fault that you see what you see. But what you see is real. Ricky's in Bristol. Ricky, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Ricky.
I'd just like to say that actually I'm quite disappointed that Bojo's gone this early.
Go on.
I was hoping he was going to stick around a bit longer, possibly till sort of general election time, where the opposition would actually have a decent chance of, sort of easy pickings, if you like.
I think I understand your point. I'm always slightly wary of it. It's a bit like in newspapers, if you've got a really good story and you take it into conference on a Monday and everyone gets really excited about it, but then something happens like Boris Johnson resigning and it gets pushed up until Tuesday, and then you go into conference on Tuesday and suddenly the story doesn't feel as... This is the only analogy I can use because it's my world, but everybody else will have something from their own world. Do you know what I mean? You put something in the fridge thinking it's going to stay fresh, and it actually doesn't. These plans, these machinations sometimes can backfire.
Yeah, absolutely that. I think the difficult thing for me is that we've seen it so often where the public are so quick to forget.
Exactly.
And the worry I have is that, someone else will take over. Hopefully it won't be anybody anywhere near as bad as Bojo, but with the current,
Can we not call him that? Can we just call him Johnson? Sorry, it's a small thing, but it's really grinding my gears to hear you talk about him like some sort of funny jester type character when he's an arsonist of the very... It's all right. I know, but I'm not having it. Sorry.
So Johnson, hopefully it won't be anywhere near as bad as him, but if it is, and what they'll try and do, I think, is just try and sweep all of that under the carpet. That was Johnson's government. That has nothing to do with us.
Oh, they all will. They all will. Incredibly.
Exactly.
I think the only one that won't be able to is probably Doris. I don't think that she would even be able to contemplate pretending that she wasn't right there until the very last.
Yeah. And then, the general public will just forget and they'll vote for them again. They just will. And I just think it's a bit disappointing. I was just really hoping that, Labour would have really easy pickings come general election time and it would be a bit of a stampede. But,
Well, I mean, who knows? Johnson probably still had some sort of electoral cachet with the country. The whole tactic, as we've described a million times on this programme, is to wait and to prolong, to procrastinate and to postpone all the P's. And then wait for something to come along that just takes the edge off the last scandal. And it's worked for him for his entire life, in every corner of his life, in his rancid sex life, in his political life, in his professional life. Every single time events, egregious behaviours that would end normal careers have popped up in Boris Johnson's life. He has sat it out until his wife takes him back, or his mistress forgives him, or his party leader gives him another chance, or his employer indulges him one final time. He's always got away with it. And that's what yesterday was about. Can I string it out? Can I string it out for a bit longer? Can I string it out? Because something will come up. Something might happen, and we can... He would have tried, and he tried in select committee. I've got to be focusing on this. And he's never focused on anything in his life. But it might still have landed. I've been watching him for too long. I've counted him and counted him out too many times to have ever been completely confident that the writing was truly on the wall. But I'm confident now. It's 10:42. Dave's on the Isle of Man. Dave, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Dave.
I was never really interested in politics at all until I'd sit down, have my morning coffee, I'd watch the morning shows, and started realising that they're taking me for a bit of an idiot.
Yeah.
You'd sit there and blatant lies would be coming out from these people that are now jumping ship, saying that Johnson is no longer he's no longer got the beans for it. He tells lies, and we finally realised it. These are the same people that are going to run for office that have blatantly come on TV and said, oh, we were briefed by number 10. All they needed to be briefed by was facts before they started spouting lies on television. Why did they need to be briefed by number 10 to come on and just tell factual lies? I'm not even sure that's a thing, but blatant lies against how the economy's doing, against how Brexit is doing, how
job numbers, economic growth, all of that. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know. How do you tell the difference between the ones who believe the lie and the ones who know they're lying?
If you're in Parliament and you're coming on TV to talk to me about the economy and how it's going, I don't expect them to get it from one of Johnson's aides to tell them this. They need to look at the facts and figures and then come on TV and tell me that. They don't need to be briefed by anybody, especially one of Johnson's aides, to tell me.
I think what we're doing is describing the inadequacy of the current and the traditional frameworks and systems for dealing with someone as corrupt as Boris Johnson. Whoever is next, they will not be as corrupt as Boris Johnson. They might still be swigging the Brexit Kool-Aid, but they will not stand in front of you and claim that black is white. They just won't. It can't happen. It's a once-in-a-lifetime aberration, and the system then works because you might be sent out to spin slightly, or you might be sent out to embellish or to be a little bit economical with the actuality, but you won't be sent out to tell bare-faced lies.
Yeah. I mean,
and they all did it, Dave. That's the point. They're all trying to wash their hands today, but they all did it. Every single last one of them did it, and I believe they knew they were doing it, except the really, really, really stupid ones.
I mean, James, I didn't know. I didn't know the difference between left and right, to be honest with you, before I really started getting into it. I mean, I'd follow Twitter for supporting my football team and things like that, and then my friends keep telling me, God, you've gone all serious all of a sudden, haven't you, Dave? And it was kind of beefing me that much that me mates would put me on mute because I'm
welcome to my world.
But, you get so blatantly caught up in it by made to look a fool. And not only that, do they come out with these, this lies about the economic growth and such, but then if something's going wrong, they then divide people by pointing at dinghies.
Yeah.
By pointing that it's his fault over there. And that's it's just wrong.
It's so transparent, but it doesn't make it any less effective. I mean, I almost feel guilty if I've played a part in bringing you to this place where you cannot look away from the skip fire that is British politics. But that's patriotism. Whatever nonsense Liz Truss may spout in the House of Commons, caring deeply and passionately about the state of the population of your country. And I mean the people. I don't mean flags or photographs or statues. I mean the people of this country. And being furious at the way they are being treated, have been treated and will continue to be treated. That is patriotism. That is patriotism. But as Dave says, look, over there, some desperate people on a dinghy. Let's all get cross about them now and let the Tories off the hook.
Tonight, with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m, only on LBC.
With the Tory party in the process of removing one leader potentially, who better to join me than a former party chair, Baroness Saida Wasi.
And I genuinely hope that the party finds its way back from the terrible nationalistic space that it's been in recently. We keep presenting ourselves as patriots and defenders of our country, and often I look at some of my colleagues in government and it feels like arsonists have taken over the country. They're setting it alight, but they're basically dressed up as patriots.
Tonight, with Andrew Marr from 6 p.m. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. So LBC.
10:49 is the time. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The legacy that Boris Johnson leaves behind is best understood by looking at the calibre of the people that he put in the House of Lords. Absolutely abysmal. Daniel Hannan, Daniel Moylan, Claire Fox, Zach Goldsmith, Evgeny Lebedev. That story came back to life yesterday, as we knew it must, as we knew it would. Ian Botham, great cricketer, don't get me wrong, but if you want to get a measure of the man, have a look at the people he elevated into ermine, and then worry about what the rest of the country is going to look like as the dust begins to settle on his final departure. And of course, one face that hasn't been seen in the House of Lords, or indeed the House of Commons, for the duration of Boris Johnson's premiership is Rory Stewart, although his name remains upon the lips of many political commentators. And indeed, I was interviewing Miriam Margolyes yesterday, Rory Stewart of all people, and she was talking about what a stand-up guy you are and how much she wished that you had kept a hand on the tiller of British politics. Thank you for your time this morning. Can we talk as if we're not on the radio? Would you mind? Can I just ask how you're feeling?
Sure. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling, obviously, a great sense of relief that he's finally announced that he's going. I'm also feeling a bit of uncertainty, a bit of trepidation about what's going to happen over the next few months. I mean, how quickly is he actually going to go? Because if he tries to hang around, as he'll be tempted to, saying that he's got to be there until, let's say, October, he can cause a lot of problems in the remaining months. And this is obviously a very, very serious time in every way. I mean, I'm not just talking about the fact that our fuel bills are going to be tripling. I'm really worried about the global situation as well. I'm very worried about China, Taiwan, as well as Russia. And I think every day that he remains is going to inflict more and more damage on the country.
Because no hand on the tiller at all doesn't just involve aimlessly floating around until a new captain is appointed. It actually involves making things worse than they would be even with someone as awful as Boris Johnson still in charge?
Well, I definitely think, we definitely need to get rid of him immediately. What I'm worried about is that he may try to negotiate for a situation in which he hangs around until the next leader comes in. So it would be much, much better to put an interim leader in, to put in, even somebody like Dominic Raab in an interim situation than let Boris hang around. Because if he hangs around, he'll start reappointing a new cabinet. And knowing him, he'll probably hope that by the end of the year, everyone, or by the time the election comes around, everyone will have changed their mind and he can somehow cling on.
The procrastinate, postpone, prevaricate tactic that has served him so well at every other turn in his life. Why did he run out of road, in your view? What were the clinchers in the last few days?
I began to feel that he was in real trouble when he lost the chairman of his party, Oliver Dowden. So that was after the disastrous Tiverton by-election defeat. And that was the moment. And I thought that was striking because Oliver Dowden had been out defending him very, very hard. He'd actually done some very disturbing things. He'd gone to the United States, weighing into the cultural wars on statues. He was somebody who was very ambitious. He'd been a supporter of David Cameron and flipped very easily to Boris Johnson. And I thought if he's leaving, he really has, he's somebody who has sensed something. And I wasn't therefore very surprised that that was really what turned out to be the beginning of the 2 weeks. Rishi Sunak, who with Oliver Dowden was one of Boris Johnson's very earliest backers from that intake, then went. And I think in the end, that's what brought it down. I think the idealists came out against him quite a long time ago. And of course, 75% of his backbenchers, or something like that, voted against him in the no confidence vote. But what really tipped it were the more ambitious insiders who began to sense that their careers were not helped by sticking with him. And when that happened, he was finished.
I'm getting a lot of reports that Conservative MPs are very, very keen to refer to your opening point, to get this over and done with quickly and not to have him hanging around. Sebastian Payne at the FT is talking about countless Conservatives getting directly in touch with him. And I think Bob Neal, former deputy chairman of the party, has gone public with that request as well. The problem is, as ever, Rory Stewart, the problem is that we're talking about Boris Johnson. So all the smoke signals and writing on the wall in the world that under any other circumstances with any other leader would point very clearly in one direction. With him, it doesn't work like that. He will resist furiously to defend whatever he thinks is in his best short-term interest, never mind long-term.
Oh, it's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, one of the weird things is you'll remember that when he resigned as Foreign Secretary, he refused to actually leave the building. There were these incredibly embarrassing moments where the senior civil servant in the Foreign Office had to keep saying, when are you going out? Because everybody else leaves that day. The classic images, the moving vans turn up, one lot comes out. So, and in that case, he hung around, I think, for 3 weeks because he didn't want to pay the rent on a flat. And it's quite possible he's going to try to do the same here again. But it's really, he's I think what he's revealed in the last 2 days particularly, I mean, that's when it's gone completely mad. I mean, that's when, when you start losing your two most senior members of your cabinet, you start losing 30 other ministers, and you're still trying to hang on. What he reveals is that it was such a central ego trip that he just didn't care at all about his party, about the Conservative Party, about trying to give it any future, keep it together. I mean, these parties are traditionally in British politics a sort of broad coalition of different people with different voices. And the Prime Minister was supposed to be just a kind of first among equals, a kind of cabinet government. It's not meant to be a presidential system. So really, somebody like Theresa May would never in that situation have tried to hang around. It beggars belief. I mean, I think in all the bad things that he's done, those last 2 days were among the worst. I'm not feeling at all inclined to be sort of courteous, dignified, more in sorrow than in anger. I just feel he's awful.
You've known him for most of your life. Is there a single scintilla of surprise at just how awful he's proved to be in the final furlong?
I suppose I couldn't quite believe that he would try to hang on in those circumstances, because I thought that he, with all the horror, had a sort of beady instinct for his own, himself. And I think it's just damaged him even more than his conduct in government. I mean, there's a lovely poetic line about King Charles I going to have his head chopped off, and Marvel says, and nothing in his life suited him as much as the leaving of it. And in Boris Johnson's case, I mean, it's the reverse. I mean, unlike Charles I, the kind of disgraceful time in government is followed up by a completely disgraceful exit.
Speaking of exits, what about you? People always ask whenever you appear on the programme whether or not you would return to frontline politics. It'd be a lot easier now than it would have been last week.
Yeah, so, James, I'm obviously not an MP, so I'm not a leadership candidate. You have to be a member of parliament to be running for leadership. I think if I felt the party could come back onto a more moderate centre ground path, I think there are some very, very serious things happening in the world. And I would be deeply, deeply honoured to try to help if I could in some way. I think realistically it's pretty difficult, to be honest, if you're not an MP. They're going to be filling their cabinet in a way that tries to rebuild different bits of the party. So my guess is nobody's going to be calling me, but I think that I would love to do it. I would love to do it, particularly if I thought we could rebuild the centre ground of British politics. I hate this kind of lurch to populism in the sense that we're becoming like a mini United States.
In the meantime, you're keeping busy, not least with the podcast you co-host with Alistair Campbell, The Rest is Politics. Next time you record an episode, here's a little teaser for you to ask him. Who was the last Prime Minister to both enter and exit number 10 Downing Street via a general election?
Oh, that's very good. Okay, I'm going to do an emergency thing in 5 minutes for them. I'll ask him that. Thank you.
Rory Stewart, many thanks indeed. I'll leave that hanging as a hook and tease on this programme as well. There's some dispute about who it might have been, but I'm going to tell you something for nothing. It was a very, very, very long time ago, which is a remarkable reflection of politics, but also, I think, a reminder of the fact that this too will pass. Yes, Johnson has been and remains uniquely awful, but it looks as if the system has survived in a way that I don't think many Americans are currently confident they could say the same about their system. It looks as if ultimately the system could actually expel the toxin from the body politic, and that expulsion likely to be confirmed in the next couple of hours, hopefully while we are on air. So back to the question of simply how you're doing this morning, but also I think perhaps time to ask now how we all feel about these people trying desperately to wash their hands of him in public.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
It is 3 minutes after 11. You know, I just asked myself during the news bulletin there which other former Conservative MPs I would be as interested in hearing from, or even more interested in hearing from than Rory Stewart. And there's only actually one name on my list. That's Michael Heseltine, Lord Heseltine, who will join us imminently. So as things stand, the mood music, to use that dreadful phrase that is very popular at moments like this, is very much that the Conservatives, the membership, the MPs, are very keen not to see Boris Johnson remain in post until the autumn as a sort of caretaker government, which would remain in place while the business of finding a replacement for him is undertaken. They are categorically resisting that, according to almost every report that I can see. And I'm not someone who's routinely in receipt of messages from Conservative MPs. I do bizarrely get the odd one, but I mean your proper political correspondents who will be in WhatsApp groups and who will be able to canvass the feeling among the members in a way that I can't do. So that's interesting. It tallies with Rory Stewart's fears, or rather it addresses Rory Stewart's fears and offers some reassurance that probably won't be permitted. You know, if it happens today, then he doesn't even overtake Neville Chamberlain. And if he goes today and Dominic Raab or AN other steps in as a caretaker prime minister, there was one report in the newspaper today suggesting Theresa May might do it. But if that happens in the next 48 hours, then he doesn't even overtake Neville Chamberlain on the list of longest-serving prime ministers. As Holly just said in the news there, the 28-day limit would be for Theresa May. To overtake Theresa May, he'd have to wait for a month. So that's story number one that's bubbling under at the moment. Story number two would be the leadership candidates who have got campaign teams and plans in place. Robert Peston, the political editor of ITV, of course, has put that together. He's got Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman. Wow. Tom Tugendhat, Nadeem Zahawi and Penny Mordaunt. I think you can add Brexit hardman Steve Baker to that list because he seemed to announce his possible candidacy earlier this morning. But, you know, these are crazy times. Michael Heseltine joins us now. Lord Heseltine, of course, a former Deputy Prime Minister. And I think you'll allow me to suggest, Lord Heseltine, somebody who has counted them in and indeed counted them out. How does this one rank in your memories?
Well, the real distinction, the only distinction, is the lack of dignity in this occasion. It's quite obvious since Michael Howard and William Hague, as former leaders of the party, said the game was over, and then the 148 MPs who voted that the Prime Minister would have to go. But it's been a very undignified process, and well, anyway, at least said soon as mended, so to speak.
Well, yes, and what does mending look like?
Well, this is the great problem, because I coined the phrase that if Boris goes, Brexit goes, because of all the achievements, if you can call it that, Boris can claim it is getting Brexit done. And of course, it was done on the basis of a pack of lies, which now are unraveling. And the other interesting piece of political misfortune is that Keir Starmer obviously believed he was going to be fighting Boris Johnson on a high Brexit ticket.
Yes.
And made that ridiculous speech he made the other day. Now going to have to rewrite that speech.
You think so? You think so?
Oh, I think so. Because
it was a gun spiking exercise and the guns have gone.
Exactly, and the bullets are not going to be fired. Well, look, I can't be sure because we're in an unpredictable period. But as I understand it, the Conservative Party will now need to regroup on a much more centralist position if it's going to have a chance of winning back the votes it's lost, particularly to the Dems in the south of England. I think it'll be very difficult to win back the Labour votes in the north, but in the south of England, the Lib Dems are making big inroads on safe Tory seats on a pro-European ticket. So the Tories, I think, will have to remember what they were told by every prime minister after Churchill, that our destiny is in Europe. Now, that doesn't mean to say we ought immediately apply to rejoin the European Union, but we have got to change the relationship, and all the sniping and snide remarks and the
threats,
confrontation in Northern Ireland,
yes,
and the ludicrous spectrum that we're going to tear up a whole range of rules which make civilized behavior legally protected. All that sort of stuff's got to go.
Well, you're describing a reality that is recognisable to most of my listeners, but much of the country still views reality through the lens of the right-wing media, and certainly through that lens, Brexit credentials are going to be crucial in the leadership election, and they're not going to be looking for credentials like yours, Lord Heseltine.
Yes, but you have to look not at the right-wing newspapers, who, curiously enough, if you read them as carefully as I do, the journalists are beginning to revolt that news stories are appearing which make a nonsense of the editorial policy. I mean, the most obvious is the Daily Mail and the report from the OECD that shows that Britain is going to be the least effective economy, other than, I think, Russia, of all the major economies. And even the Daily Mail published this league table. Of course, I think they didn't make a huge headline out of it. But if you read the Daily Telegraph, well, look at the city columns, and you will see some quite interesting things are being reported there. So the journalists, who are not slaves to the editorial policy, are using their news coverage opportunities to let the truth in, But don't worry about the extreme right wing. Talk about the opinion polls and the by-election results. And that's what, if I was chairman of the Conservative Party, heaven forfend, I would be saying to my colleagues, this is the target ground. This is the balance we have to achieve.
I thought it was only me that had noticed that about the newspapers. The comment pages continue to be completely crackers, but the news pages have absolutely, the Telegraph, I would say more than the Mail, have actually undergone something of a transformation in the last 6 months. It's always good to know you're not alone in these contemplations. If you were pushed, I just read out the list of people who've already thrown their hats into the ring. Is it fair to ask you whether or not any of them tickle your fancy?
Oh, it's totally fair to ask me, but you won't be surprised that I know that in certain parts of the Tory party I'm toxic.
It's the kiss of death.
The last thing I would do is to put my name behind someone I wanted to win. The most effective thing I could do in many cases is choose the least attractive person and back them to the hilt.
Finally, Lord Heseltine, there is very little air of celebration anywhere at the moment. I mean, including people who have been perhaps devoutly wishing for this day to arrive, because, albeit that the arsonist may be leaving the building, that the damage is only now going to start being fully assessed. How much damage has he done, leaving Brexit aside now, how much damage has he done to the sort of rubric of government, to the framework of democracy?
I think that you can't leave Brexit aside.
No, I know.
It's not just an economic disaster. It is a disaster with the truth. And so as the truth is at the heart of the dilemma you're talking about, you can't ignore Brexit.
Right,
but on the terms of the truth, I'm afraid that the truth for Boris is something you use when convenient and disregard when inconvenient. There is no integrity or serious political philosophy behind the Johnson premiership. It is opportunism, photo opportunity, tell them what they want to hear, move on. Some people, it's quite attractive, sort of boosterism, but the truth of the matter is that the truth is very different. We are now facing one of the worst economic circumstances I can remember. There's no point in pretending that changing the leader is going to change the economy. It's not. But if I could give advice to whoever becomes the leader, I would say to them, look, get out there and tell the truth as it is, because you have got to regain trust. And people, they know in their guts that you can't cut taxes and just pile more money onto borrowing at a time when interest rates are going to rise and mortgage payers are going to be consequently hurt. The money, well, I mean, I've been a supporter, indeed a member of Tory governments for now quite a long period of time. And there was a certain integrity. We tried to tell people that if you want tax cuts, you've got to earn them and you've got to have a growing economy. We've got a stagnant economy, and therefore tax cuts means more borrowing, more interest rates. And at a time of high inflation, it's going to be tough enough for people without deluding them into the idea that central government has got some magic wand. It hasn't.
And that's going to be a key platform in the looming leadership battle.
And just look what's happening to the pound.
Yes.
So the international marketplace, they know what's going on. And of course, As the pound goes down, import prices go up. More trouble on the inflationary front.
And fuel. A final word on all the erstwhile cheerleaders and facilitators who are now furiously trying to wash their hands of Boris Johnson on the public stage. What would you make of them? Will it work?
They would, wouldn't they?
Lord Heseltine, many thanks indeed. 14 minutes after 11 is the time. They would, wouldn't they? Almost channeling Christine Keeler there towards that's an unexpected comparison. It's coming up to 11:15. The number you need is 0345 6060973. Or was it Mandy Rice Davis? I can never remember. The question we're asking now perhaps will include the one that I just asked Lord Heseltine there. What do you think of the hand-washing exercises, these attempts to disassociate? Oliver Dowden, Rory Stewart reminded us, was really absolutely up to his elbows in the whole culture war horrors, the whole made-up nonsense about values being under threat or the West being in some sort of jeopardy, the corrupt chicken-licking type rhetoric of very far-right demagogues and journalists in America, people who think that statues are more important than human beings and that slavery is defensible, all of that. So Dowden was absolutely immersed in it, and yet he was the first to break cover and say, up with this I will not put. It's odd that. And of course, underpinning all of our pontifications this morning is the big question of how are you responding to this news? I'm surprised to feel so low. Actually, I mean, it's an enormous relief. I keep going back to the arson, and I think it works better than almost anything else. We've caught the arsonist. The flames are being extinguished. But my goodness me, that house is nothing like the one that we had just 6 short years ago. It's 11:15.
Boris Johnson's resignation. Follow the fallout on LBC.
Are you a business owner who's ready to retire? Or maybe an entrepreneur ready to sell and move on to your next exciting project? At Barnes Rofe, we actively work with successful entrepreneurs to help them through the sales process and maximize exit value. So why not get some first-rate advice and speak to one of our experts? Your first consultation will be free, and you can make sure you really are getting the best deal. Contact us at barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
Fever Tree Rhubarb and Raspberry Tonic Water. Made with sweet, hand-picked English rhubarb, balanced with juicy raspberries that grow in the Scottish valleys. So, if 3/4 of your G&T is a Fever Tree tonic, I'd be tempted to call it a T&G. Fever Tree Rhubarb and Raspberry Tonic Water. Mix with the best. Delicious.
1977. Sweaty clubs, screaming singers, volume turned to full. I loved it. But maybe I went too often, because recently my hearing's not been so good. But now I'm back. Got sorted out at Specsavers with their advanced hearing aids. Was like music to my ears.
To find out more or book a free hearing test, search Specsavers Hearing.
Intrepid Travel is pleased to announce that the world has officially reopened, and that with over 900 small group adventures to choose from, there's even more of it to see than before. And because our emphasis is on socially conscious travel, and having been carbon neutral since 2010, seeing the Earth with Intrepid Travel won't cost the Earth. Visit intrepidtravel.com and see where it takes you. Intrepid Travel. Travel is back. For good. Excludes flights to and from destinations.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
11:17 is the time. Hugh Edwards has turned up at number 10 Downing Street, the doyen of BBC broadcasters, and given how many have now joined us over at LBC, he's one of the only true legends left on the payroll at the BBC. But that means that events are afoot. If I had to put a few quid on it, you know what ratio I'm going to go for? Will the resignation happen on our show? I'm going to go 52-48, yes. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to jinx anything. But as I say that, Beth Rigby, the rather splendid political editor over at Sky News, reports that the Prime Minister has let it be known he will shortly be making new appointments to his ministerial team. Okay, deep breaths. So yesterday he appointed a Chancellor of the Exchequer and a Secretary of State for Education, who have already called for him to resign. This, I think, is what Heseltine and Stewart were talking about. Two, if you like, Tory statesmen of different generations and quite different outlooks in many ways, but nevertheless, men who've earned the right to be described, I think, as statesmen. And that's what they were both worried about. It's as if the head has been removed, but the chicken is still running around the farmyard. The Chancellor has said you've got to go. He hasn't had the job for 24 hours. He's barely had the job for 24 hours. And then the woman that replaced him at Health, Michelle Donnellan, has added her voice to the clarion calls for Johnson to do the right thing. And yet he's now talking about making new appointments to his ministerial team. Not obviously with a view to remaining Prime Minister, but with a view permanently, but with a view to remaining Prime Minister briefly. That's incredible. Julian Suffolk says it's like a zombie nightmare. They keep killing him and he keeps coming back to life. I find that breathtaking, actually. I don't know. I mean, the reshuffle, Tim Shipman as well at the Sunday Times, someone who really does know exactly what is going on. And Tim Shipman writes the reshuffle will continue shortly, which, I mean, is actually both hilarious and incredible at the same time. Absolutely incredible. I think someone told me at the top of the show on Twitter they were going to neck a little shot of something every time I use the phrase absolutely incredible, so I should be careful. I don't want to get you into trouble, and I certainly wouldn't want to think that you were driving later. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Why? Because we're talking about the resignation of Boris Johnson, which is likely to happen in the next couple of hours. Mike's in Northampton. Mike, what would you like to say?